Well, when it gets into the fall, I'm sure you remember the fall can just be home to some incredible winds. Think about November 10th. The Edmund Fitzgerald went down. I don't remember how many years ago, decades and decades ago, but it was a Great Lake shipping freighter that was literally cracked in half and went down in Lake Superior with the winds. And I've seen it. I lived in the UP, Michigan for 14 years on Lake Superior. I remember my first year there. There was a big windstorm around that time, and I remember going out to a place the locals call Paradise and some rocks, and the waves that were normally in the water, it was normally 5-10 feet down below, was crashing, and waves were hitting 20 feet up above. It was amazing. If you would have fallen in, you would have been killed. And it's crazy because it's not the ocean, but the Lake Superior is just a giant body of water, and those winds of change that come through that time are winds that we have to hunt in, and we enjoy hunting when it comes to fall. We actually have had some really windy weather lately. It's a Tuesday right now. It was fairly windy yesterday. It died down a little bit at night, but it still carried on into the night. It was very, very windy on Sunday. So we had some wind and some change. It was in the 70s, low 70s on Sunday. And then yesterday it was a high of low 60s. And today we're in the 50s to 60. It's just beautiful weather. It's set up perfectly. What's different about today than yesterday is the winds are dying, but they're still there, which I like, because then we have a defined wind and direction that we can count on when we're hunting, but it's not too loud. And it just so happens that Tyler's here, and he's our hunt winner that we drew for our charity event for Camp Kicking Bear. So it was awesome that people like Tyler donate to that. We were able to give Kicking Bear a check for over $26,000 this year. And it's an event we host here, and Habitat Day. Maybe you guys can get in on it next year. But Tyler, you're pretty excited to come today.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And wait, we're going to get him on film again. But yeah, it was fun calling you. And the cool thing is with Tyler coming today, it was pretty windy the last couple of days. So you're set up for a good sit. And Leo last year had an opportunity at Lucky, didn't capitalize on, and that made Lucky even more lucky. And so Lucky is actually one of the ones we're going in on tonight. Lucky, and I don't know what the other buck is called. It might be Simba from last year. We're not sure. We need more pictures, but a couple really nice bucks coming into that. In and around shooting light, not during shooting light at this spot, but I'm pretty excited, and it really is being set up with the cooler weather and that drop in wind. So we like the wind this time of year because it gives us an opportunity to hunt change and to really narrow down when we like to sit. You know, there's been some studies out there. There's a Penn State University study where they talked about that deer like to move more when it's windy. I don't like advice like that because it's taken out of context. And what I mean by that is these hunters go up and they sit on their favorite ridge and end up hugging their favorite oak tree stand for 2-3 hours because the wind's about to blow them out of the tree. That's not where you'd see deer move. What we see in this hill country around here, and it was hill country where the study was done, is I've seen an excessive amount of deer, over 40 deer one time. It was, I think, 2010, over in southwest Wisconsin, the most deer I've ever seen in Wisconsin, Minnesota. First, I want to thank you guys so much for buying and trying our food plot seed blends. Now, I want to introduce to you our switchgrass blends. And I say blend because we have a southern variety and a northern variety specific to your region. We have a base seed that goes into that that's specific to you. And then we have a couple of moderately height stiffening varieties within there so that we can make sure that your stand of switchgrass stays up longer. Check them out on our website. Thank you guys so much. We've sold seed now in over 40 states. And we really appreciate you trying us out. Check out our switchgrass on our site, www.whitetailhabitatsolutions.com. They were all moving from the windy side hollow that was facing the west. And then they're going up over a saddle in the field in the CRP and getting down to the lee side, down into another draw. So they were moving a lot, but they're moving to get out of the wind. So if you think you're going to sit up in an area and just be buffeted by wind and see more deer, again, you're out in the woods, it's daylight, there's always a chance a deer could go by, especially during the rut, but I wouldn't hang my hat on it. So a study like that is very misleading. Think about it, why deer are moving, and that puts you on the stand where you might actually see some deer, which we'll talk about here at the end. But really important to keep that in context. A deer move to get out of the wind, not to move in the wind or to a windy spot, and that can put unfair or disproportionate number of deer at your feet when you think about that you're trying to find that quiet side. Low impact to access. This is awesome. I went into a windy stand a couple nights ago. It was great because As I dropped about 200 feet in elevation down into a lower bowl where wind could come out of a draw and follow down to a neighbor's house about 300 yards away, it was really windy up top. So those areas where I expect deer that might be bedding towards the top, I can just get into that spot. It's really windy, and then it's getting quieter as I'm getting down to that spot where I expect deer to move in during the evening. So perfect spot where I'm getting out of the wind, finding a spot where I'm out of the wind completely. I can hear the wind really rocking the trees up top, but I'm not sitting in the wind, and I can use the wind to my access, which is always great, especially for us hunting in hill country. But you hunt that quiet side. That leads us into number 3 here. Again, you're not hunting the windy side, you're hunting the quiet side. What do I mean by that? You're hunting the downwind side of the woods. Big thicket of conifer. You get on that downwind side, you're gonna have less wind in that location. The lee side of a ridge, the quiet side, the calm side. We found with 300-400 foot change in elevation, once you get down 100 feet, it's pretty quiet. You can hear the trees really going to town up top, but hardly a leaf stirring where we're at. And I've used that to my advantage. Cold front comes through, drops 25 mile an hour. It's October 26, 2007. And I drop down, I come in from the side, it's windy up top, beautiful cold front, end up shooting a really nice 15-point buck, just beautiful buck, mature buck. And I was down in that quiet area. He wasn't up there on top. He was coming from the bottom, actually, coming up along the side, chasing a couple does, getting a little ruddy. And bottom line, I was hunting on that quiet side, that lee side of the ridge. So whether it's the lee side of a giant switchgrass field, thick, tall CRP grasses, maybe more like big blue stem, little blue stem, Indian grass down towards the south where it stands up all winter. But bottom line is you're hunting on that quiet side, and that's where deer will be. They're not out there on the windy side, the facing side. And that's why, even when you think about it, just as a side note, when you're planting food plots, when you have bedding areas, think about those food plots. You have that opening facing to the northwest. That's those big fall winds that are coming through. They're actually not the predominant wind. People think, well, I get all northerly winds. No, if you're getting colder temperatures every single day for 60 days in a row, it's getting probably cold. It's probably northwest winds, but that doesn't happen. It drops and then it moderates. Moderates meaning it might have been average high in the 30s. Now it's average high in the teens. By that second or third day when it's in the teens, you're going to have south-southwest winds, southwest winds, south-southeast, depending where you're at. That's your predominant wind. But think about that. You're getting those harsh, cold winds coming out of the northwest, but it could happen on any side of that food plot. That's why we encourage you to put that 6-8 feet of switchgrass, maybe some cuttings in the woods, some hinge cuttings, some dropping some trees. That's actually a feathered look where you actually have grasses, shrubs, hardwood regeneration, then hardwoods. People go in, they call them feathering, edge feathering projects where they're just hinge cutting a bunch of timber. That's not feathering, that's drastic. That's cuttings, then hardwood. But that grass, think about that, it's hard. That's why does like hiding fawns in grasses. They're out of the weather, they're out of winds, and it breaks apart the scent. But if you put that grass around a food plot, especially on the edges you want deer to bed, now they feel safe beyond that because they're not being buffeted by the wind. They can't see out across food plot. So you're trying to find areas of grass, lee side of ridge, or even the backside of conifer stand or woods, and that's where you find a disproportionate number of deer and why you should be hunting in the wind in that location. I love hunting right after the wind dies. And like I said, number 5, the speed of the wind is all relative. So let's say the winds have been 40, 50 mile an hour. They were up over 40 mile an hour gusts 2 days ago. So when it drops down to 20 miles an hour, that's a huge difference. And the wind speeds are cut in half. If it goes from 20 to 10, 20 to 8, huge drop. It goes from 50 to 30, huge drop. So you hunt those drops. It might still be windy, but you're hunting those drops, and if it's still windy, like 15, 20, 30 mile an hour, really look for those lee sides, those quiet sides, find where deer could actually take some shelter. We had a nice buck moving the other day that we had pictures of, a 3-year-old or a 2-year-old that Dylan and I passed up, and he was about 100 feet in elevation. He was up high, but we go down almost 400 feet in elevation there. So think, well, they still can be in that top layer, but once you're down again, 50 to 100 feet in elevation, you're getting out of that wind in hill country, let alone on the backside of a conifer thicket or wherever. Number 6, think about this. Think about a disproportionate number of deer getting blown off the tops. They normally would have been on those nice ridges up top, or maybe they're out in the open hardwoods early in the season, and they're moving beyond those conifers, behind the CRP, on the lee side of a ridge, and it's the rut. So now you're taking a disproportionate number of deer, sticking them on the quiet side of the habitat during the rut. It's like throwing gas on fire when it comes to the rut. Great time to look for those big changes in wind. Hunt windy weather, but in the quiet side. Don't hug your favorite oak tree up on a ridge exposed to a bunch of wind and really take a chance of hurting yourself and ruining your hunt at the same time, just hunting in the wrong spot. Understand why deer might move, if they do, during wind a little bit more, because they're just looking to get out of the wind. And think about it. That's why deer, a lot of times we get strong south winds. It's 10 degrees, 5 degrees, daytime high. Could be end of November, December. They're moving to the north facing slope and bedding there because they're out of the wind. The wind is far more important than if it's a cloudy day or sunny day or being exposed to the sun. They conserve energy by getting out of the wind. Imagine if they're sitting facing a south facing slope just to, quote, get some sun in the morning as the sun's rising up in the southeast in southerly sky. It's really false. It's kind of a myth that deer are bedding on the south facing. Now they feed on the south facing slope a lot more. That's why you find a lot of sheds there, because they could be feeding all night there. That's where the browse is at. But when they want to bed, they want to get out of the wind, and that's no different from when they're moving, cruising, moving to food, between bedding areas, moving from food to bedding, back and forth, going to a water hole. Hunt the quiet side, hunt those changes in the wind, look for those holes in the wind where it's dropping, and you can really use the wind to your advantage. And we're going to try that with Tyler tonight because, like I said, it's been windy for a couple days. We still have a little wind, enough to make it defined tonight. I like a little bit of wind. It seems like when it's calm, it's pretty tough. You can't, like if you're sitting on a ridge point, if you have just a little bit of wind, 3 or 4 miles an hour, you know that it's going to go down as it gets closer to dark down the one side of the ridge. But when there's no wind, it just pools around. You can go down either side with sinking thermals. So we have defined wind tonight. There's been a big change over the last couple of days. The temps are changed, and we expect really good things. And a lot of it has to do with that change in wind. So stay tuned for that. The bottom line is take advantage of hunting the wind, learn how to hunt around it, and you'll be on target for this fall and beyond. I urge everyone out there to really check out my web classes. They've been wildly successful. We have one that details how you should design your land, another one that details how you should plant and maintain and manage a food plot program. How can you make those decisions that fit your land specifically and not someone else's? Unfortunately, there's so much information in the hunting industry that says you should do this, but it doesn't apply to you. These web classes directly apply to you. And then we have our third web class that came out last year, our rut web class, navigating the entire rut. And then we have our fourth one coming out, which is hunting hills and thermals. I urge you to check those out, try the web classes, and they're all about teaching, helping you understand how you can navigate, not only managing your property, food plots, and the rut, but also hunting strategically, hills, thermals, and wherever you pursue whitetails for your dream and your passion.